Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a mind-boggling medical anomaly, one that completely altered the lives of thousands of kids. We're unpacking a hidden epidemic where shifting definitions, pharma marketing, and massive institutional blind spots all collided.
Right off the bat, we've got to confront what is essentially a statistical impossibility. A 4,000% explosion in pediatric bipolar diagnoses in less than 10 years. You don't just see a massive spike like that naturally. It totally defies standard biology. So what on earth happened between 1994 and 2003 to cause such a drastic shift?
To put that into perspective, we went from a tiny fraction, just 25 diagnoses per 100,000 youth in 1994, to over 1,000 by 2003. That is literally a clinical rarity morphing into a mass phenomenon practically overnight. When numbers skyrocket like that, it's a huge red flag. It tells us we're looking at a systemic shift in the medical field, not some sudden biological mutation in the population.
Section 1. The Pediatric Bipolar Explosion. Redefining a disease.
So here's where it all starts. A group of researchers out of Massachusetts General Hospital basically decided that the standard traits for bipolar disorder were just wrong for kids. They pushed this idea of a broad phenotype. Instead of the classic signs like episodic euphoria, they swapped the criteria out for chronic non-episodic irritability, basically just being chronically irritable. And by doing that, they completely erased the lines between actual bipolar disorder and standard childhood behavioral issues or severe ADHD.
Section 2. The Financial Architecture. Following the money.
Well, a 2008 Senate investigation turned up a jaw-dropping discrepancy. The very architects of this new broad phenotype were quietly raking in millions from pharma companies. Take Dr. Biederman, for example. He reported just $200,000 in outside income to Harvard between 2000 and 2007. But the investigation? It found he actually received at least $1.6 million. That's a huge difference. And these payments were coming right from the manufacturers of the drugs being pushed for these newly defined diagnoses.
Senator Charles Grassley led this investigation, and it totally blew the lid off what the sources describe as credibility laundering. You had prestigious academic institutions, places like Harvard and Mass General, inadvertently providing the ethical cover needed to market heavy mood stabilizers as safe, conservative choices for kids.
And as the senator pointed out, when top-tier researchers hide massive financial conflicts of interest, the scientific legitimacy of everything they've published just collapses. It's a house of cards. This monumental institutional failure paved the exact way for the widespread, unregulated, off-label prescribing of heavy psychiatric meds to hundreds of thousands of children.
Section 3. Pathologizing the gifted mind. Misidentifying the victims. Now, who were the primary casualties caught up in this diagnostic dragnet? Well, it turns out many were what we call twice exceptional, or 2E children. If you haven't heard that term, it refers to kids with a high baseline IQ, often over 130, who also have neurodivergent traits like ADHD. These are brilliant but asynchronous kids. Their intellect is miles ahead of their emotional regulation, and they got swept right up in this expansion. It's honestly tragic. Completely healthy, gifted traits, things known as Dabrowski's overexcitabilities, were stripped of their normal developmental context. Psychiatrists who had absolutely zero training in gifted development were actively pathologizing them. Like if a kid intensely questioned authority, it was suddenly slapped with the label of bipolar rage. Or hyperfocus. Say a kid stays up all night coding or building something. Suddenly that's clinically interpreted as manic sleeplessness. They took these kids' natural intensity and twisted it to fit a medical model of pathology.
Section 4. Valproate and neurotoxic harm. The chemical cost.
So what happens when you misdiagnose these kids? Well, you get treatments like valproate. And the source material highlights something truly devastating. Instead of stabilizing these children, the drug was inducing a profound cognitive decline, called VIRCD. Valproate-induced reversible cognitive decline. We're talking about a syndrome that actually mimics neurodegenerative dementia, causing psychomotor slowing and major memory impairment in young, developing minds.
Here is why that happens. Valproate acts as an HDC inhibitor. Now, adolescence is an absolutely crucial period where the brain naturally trims away unused connections to run more efficiently. It's a process called synaptic pruning. But giving an HDC inhibitor during puberty, it essentially slams the brakes on that vital development. It causes brain volume loss, like a pseudoatrophy. It acted as a chemical restraint. arresting their neurodevelopment and trapping these high IQ kids in a pharmacological fog.
And here is the absolute kicker. Years later, rigorous longitudinal studies tracked these chronically irritable children into adulthood. Do you want to know the conversion rate to classic episodic bipolar disorder? Just 1.2%. Barely over 1%. That proves the initial diagnosis was overwhelmingly false. These kids simply never had bipolar disorder to begin with.
Section 5. The UK Natural Experiment, a tale of two systems.
If you need more proof that this was a manufactured epidemic, we just have to look across the pond. Despite having the exact same access to medical literature, the exact same diagnostic manuals, and the exact same pharma products, the UK never experienced this crazy 4,000% explosion. Over there, the pediatric bipolar diagnosis rate stayed incredibly low and stable the whole time.
Why? Because the structural differences between the two healthcare systems were just night and day. In the US, you have a fee-for-service model, direct-to-consumer TV ads for drugs, and unrestrained off-label prescribing. But in the UK, National Health Service doctors are salaried. They use strict evidence-based guidelines that require specialist confirmation, and drug commercials aimed at consumers, totally prohibited. The UK system essentially neutralized the perverse financial incentives that poured gasoline on the epidemic here in the States.
Section 6. The unresolved legacy. Scientific correction, unremediated harm.
So, the 1990s brought us the rise of this broad phenotype, but fast forward to 2010, and NIMH research fully invalidated the whole concept. Finally, in 2013, the medical field officially admitted they got it wrong. The DSM-5 explicitly threw out the pediatric bipolar broad phenotype and created a whole new category, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, putting it over in the depressive disorders chapter. But you know what the real tragedy is? The medical system never systematically went back to retroactively undiagnose the original victims.
We are talking about over 30,000 kids, and that is a really conservative estimate from the source documents of misdiagnosed youths who were given these neurotoxic suppressants. Those kids are now adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. They've lived for decades under the shadow of a completely false label, and the worst part? Many of them have absolutely no idea that their ongoing cognitive struggles or memory issues might actually be iatrogenic, meaning they were medically induced by the very treatments they were prescribed.
Which brings us to a final incredibly urgent question drawn right from the source material. We know pharmaceutical companies paid out $4 billion in settlements to governments, but $0 of that went to the actual victims. So how do we provide restorative justice to this lost generation who spent their most formative years under pharmacological suppression? And honestly, what structural changes do we need to make right now so a systemic failure of this magnitude literally never happens again? Think about that as you digest this explainer. Thanks for joining me, and always keep questioning what you learn.